Southern California is the undisputed home of action sports. With perfect weather and unlimited spots, it's almost a rule that pros call this home base. But the thing is, BMX doesn't always follow the rules.
What's the obsession? It's this situation. A chemical dependence. We'll take care of it. We'll take care of it. Clinical depression. We've got your prescription. What's the addiction? Your prediction. You need medication. Turn it off, turn it on, turn it off, turn it on, turn it off, turn it on, turn it off, turn it off.
Greenville's pretty much in the middle of nowhere. I mean, there's not a good highway going to it. If you need a bigger airport, you have to drive an hour and a half away to Raleigh.
I've lived here my whole life and seen it go from pretty much nothing, where my mom was telling me those farms everywhere, and now it's still a small town, but it's growing real fast for the East Coast.
Greenville grew up on tobacco money, and it's pretty well gone now. But you know, when I moved here, there's tobacco on the roads, streets falling off of trucks, and other than that, it grew up around the university. There's 30,000 people at the school, and students and faculty, and there's another 30,000 that are non-university related residents, so it's half the town.
If you were to take BMX out of Greenville, like somehow remove it completely, you'd be left with a college, a hospital, and baseball, and that's about it. You know, you can't even say downtown, because downtown is just like this crosshair of like, you know, bar, and that's like it.
For the most part, when I say I live in Greenville, people are like, why on earth do you live there and where is it? So random people, I mean, they don't know where this place is. They think it's only made on the map from BMX.
My grandpa called me when I first moved here, and he told me that he had just drove through there. And he told me it was in South Carolina, and I was like, no, it's in North Carolina, and he argued with me for like 10 minutes about it.
Greenville's kind of called, I don't know, all the frat boys, whatever, call it G Vegas, which is kind of funny because it's seriously, Vegas is this crazy city in the middle of absolutely nothing, in the middle of the desert. Greenville is kind of the same thing. There's nothing around Greenville. If you drive 2 or 3 miles one direction, I mean, you're in a tobacco field, you're in a cotton field. There's nothing around here. I can't even really think of Greenville without BMX. I mean, I wouldn't be here. It's just some middle of nowhere town.
Greenville may be in the middle of nowhere, but its BMX origins are the same as any other city. A few kids looking to have fun on their bikes.
There were a couple of half pipes in town before us, backyard ramps in Greenville that some of the skaters had built. Some guys a little bit older than me. They're like zero flat bottom, I mean legit half pipes, right? And my brother and I helped build another backyard ramp, and eventually we had a 10-foot, 8-foot wide half pipe in the backyard. So we had the first real half pipe, and guys came over and started riding bikes on the ramp. At one point there was 2 or 3 backyard ramps, half pipes mostly, and it was starting to get out of hand in the backyards. We got the support of a couple kids' parents, got the typical booster parent involved, and started running petition all over town. I mean, every parking lot, at every mall, and every skate shop, and door to door, and swamped the city with a petition. And after months worth of work, we ended up with, we'll give you a fence. The city put up a fence, you have to build the ramps. So, I mean, everything from like liberated plywood from local construction sites, and the whole thing went into the city park.
The first thing that comes to my mind about the first skate park in Greenville was a cheese grater. Like, it was this crazy asphalt parking lot you did not want to fall on.
I'd never seen cement that coarse ever. Like, you couldn't skateboard on it even with 80s style skateboard wheels. You would just stop.
Don and Sean also built a lot of skate course ramps that they had set up in the park, just kind of a mixed match of different quarter pipes and wedges. And the ramps were all just getting dilapidated. The city's idea was, instead of repair the ramps, they would just take it and throw it in the garbage. And they also relayered the mini ramp in steel, and when they did that, they put one sheet at the bottom, another sheet met here, so there was a huge kink running one whole side of the half pipe where they didn't know what they were doing. And after all the other ramps fell apart, the only thing that was left was the mini ramp with the kink, and that's what I rode every single day. At the time, again, all we had was a 6-foot mini ramp, but we had a full fenced-in course just with flat ground, nothing to it. So, not knowing how to build a ramp, I enlisted the help of John Byers. He drove down and helped me cut the transitions. So I basically paid for a ramp out of my pocket, built it myself, and carried it out there in pieces and assembled it at the park to have a box jump.
After guys got going and we had a decent scene, and there's a crew every day riding, and you knew you could go to the park any afternoon and there was 4 guys. You didn't have to call and ask or whatever. It was a standard session every afternoon and all night. There was a point where once the park was in place, the next thing we wanted to do was start running some contests, and little small stuff. First couple contests were actually in the McDonald's parking lot, the local McDonald's, and then ran a couple at JC Park, and then after I ran 2 or 3, then Steve Nowak ran 2 or 3 more.
He's finally at his deck, LA to see me on street cars and big things. New York, high-rise, my name way up there in big lights.
The seeds for a solid BMX scene had been planted. Then, in the spring of '94, a newcomer arrived from upstate New York that would change the Greenville scene forever. That new rider's last name was Mira, but not the Mira that you're thinking of.
I was not really riding as much as I used to, only because it was kind of tough with work and trying to get around and find places to ride. I was dating a girl at the time, and her family relocated to Durham, North Carolina, and they asked me if I wanted to come. I was about 21 years old at the time. Had nothing to lose, figured I'd go try it out for a couple of months. If it didn't work, I could always go right back to Syracuse. It worked out, and then she ended up happening to get into ECU in Eastern North Carolina. So then when she relocated to ECU, we ended up getting an apartment together. It was probably after we got everything moved in and everything settled down. I was bored one day, kind of pacing. I had my bike with me, but I looked out the window and I'm like, what is that over there? So I walked through the trees there, and across the parking lot was a fenced-in skate park, and I couldn't believe it. So right away I got on the phone and called Dave. I said, Dave, you're not gonna believe this, man. There's a skate park right across the street from where I moved. And I told him I still could not believe it, that of all the places I could have moved in this town, right outside my front window.
Once Tim found the park, it was only a matter of time before he became a fixture of the Greenville BMX scene, and it was also a matter of time before his brother came to town.
I put a new headset in my bike, was practicing getting the headset broke in, and this guy walks up and he says, hey, you ride a bunch? And I was like, yeah, who's this guy? I was like, yeah, I ride a lot, and he goes, well, maybe you know who my brother is, Dave Mira? And I was like, yeah, I know who your brother is. Now, this is in '94, so previous to the X Games, if you were on a BMXer, you had no clue who Dave Mira was. So I knew this guy wasn't pulling my leg. He wouldn't have just pulled that name out of a hat. So we started talking, and of course that was Tim Mira. And he said, yeah, I just moved here, and my brother's talking about me coming down to visit. I told him there was a ramp in my backyard. So I got excited. I said, Dave Mira, there's a chance Dave Mira's coming to my park. So I built a spine ramp and a sub box next to the box jump. So then we had a total of 4 ramps at the park.
So every day after school or whatever, I would usually go out to JC Park. And one day I went out there. There was like this pudgy Guido guy rolling around in the parking lot. And I didn't really get a good look at him. I was like, oh, weird, somebody, like I figured maybe a college kid brought out his old BMX bike or something, and he just hauled across the parking lot and did like an enormous flip over the little jump box. And I was just kind of like, what in the world is going on?
And I was like, Dave Mira is at my park. I cannot believe this. At the time, in '94, you had the pro class consisted of 7 or 8 guys. So to have Dave Mira riding my local ramp that I had built with my hands, in my backyard basically, it was just like, no way.
When Dave got to Greenville, he was in heaven. The JC skate park was literally across the street from Tim's apartment, and there was a tight crew riding every day having the time of their lives.
December 18th, 1993, I got hit by a car in Syracuse, so I was out of commission pretty much most of '94. I wasn't riding. It was crazy. It turned into just a party up in Syracuse. I came down a couple times. I said, wow, my lease is up March '95. I got to get out of Syracuse. Dude, I had this rider truck packed up a couple days before March, arrived, and I was like, dude, that's it. It was a super rainy day, whatever. I didn't look back for months. was a small scene, but you got to understand, I came from Syracuse where we didn't have any place to ride. And then come down here and I could ride every single day. It was like, wow. It changed me. It changed me as a rider, and I say the whole move to Greenville for me was a career saver, you know, without a doubt.
It would be comparable to a kid that was into basketball, having Michael Jordan show up and practice with him every day. I mean, you couldn't help but get better. You were there riding with one of the top guys in the sport. He's showing you pointers, we're riding together, we're feeding off each other, and it was just like a dream come true.
It seemed like when Dave moved there, yeah, the bar definitely was raised for everyone who was already there, because rather than seeing someone do a nice, you know, 360 or whatever, now you had this guy spinning his bars in the middle of a 360 and doing huge flips, and just like, you know, out of nowhere he would just turn it on, and it would be like you were watching something on TV, you know, and this was like, you know, your friend. And as new kids started to ride, one of the top 3 riders in the world was like, you know, what they saw every day as their standard. We were already filming ourselves with, you know, just cheap little cameras just to see ourselves ride. And at that point, there was definitely more to shoot, because Dave, he would just turn it on and crazy stuff would happen. And it was almost like I didn't want to put the camera down at that point, because I didn't want to miss what he was going to do next.
With the addition of the Mira brothers, Greenville BMX really began to pick up steam. Steve Nowak continued putting on contests, and when out-of-towners saw how much fun was happening in this tiny town, the migration began.
It was a weird combination of the contest actually drew a lot of guys in for enough of a weekend that they figured out that you could ride your bike from a cheap apartment through campus, have fun, ride street, and get downtown and back, all within, you know, 4 miles, right? So there was fun and girls and ramps to ride, and the weather was good, and it was small. Between that and Dave, you know, they'd show up, have fun, and 1 out of 4 or 5 guys would visit 3 times and then try to crash couch and move in with somebody here.
One of the first pros to make the move to Greenville was Mike Laird. Mike lived in Virginia Beach, and when his local skate park closed down, he headed south to keep his wheels rolling.
It was just a logical choice for me, you know. I had nothing to ride back at home, and I just turned pro, wanted to pursue my career, and plus, you know, I'd already been visiting Greenville, I knew Greenville, you know. Dave was there, he's the best rider in the world. What better than to strengthen your riding and ride with the best guy?
As more riders began trickling in, the apartment complex next to JC Park was the default spot for riders to set up camp.
When I pretty much moved to Greenville, Mira had a connection, Kingston Apartments. It was literally right beside JC Park. What better place to live than right beside the park? You didn't have to drive, you know, it was awesome.
It was, you know, Ramsdale, and this dude Todd Everett lived next door to me, and my buddy Rob. Laird was right down the couple doors down.
We had Allen, Wirtz, and Famberg, same apartment complex, but across the street. You didn't have to, you know, call. You just literally stick your head out the door, see if somebody's car is out in the parking lot, and then, you know, just walk down to the apartment and say what's up, you know, it was awesome.
The next big name to become a part of the Greenville scene was Ryan Nyquist. Nyquist was a California native who also spent considerable time at Woodward Camp, so he had to see something special to make him head to Greenville.
I think my first time actually coming to Greenville, I drove down with Dave from Woodward, Pennsylvania. I was following him, and we were going through an intersection, and he had like a white Mustang that was almost saleened out, not quite. Probably had like the kit, maybe it was a Cobra, but he went through the intersection and just gunned it. And you know, it was like wet ground. He just did a full 360 in the intersection and then came out right out of it. And everybody waited. Like nobody was like screeching halt. Everybody was just like, damn. And I was just like, this is a pretty cool place. If you can just do a full 360 down in the intersection, like, you know, I might want to be here. So, you know, it wasn't until a few years later, like Dave actually called me up. Was like, hey man, like you should move out. You know, I just bought a house. Like you can rent a room and you know, come out. And I was like, man, yeah, possibly.
By now, the BMX world had really taken note of this tiny town in North Carolina. Greenville may have been small, but the riding that was going down on a daily basis helped shape the face of modern-day BMX.
Laird always calls it the good old days. You know, it's like when we go out there and it was guaranteed you're going to see Mira, myself, Laird, you know, and just a handful of other like real crazy riders. And for no reason at all, we just start just going off.
I mean, I remember just warming up with stuff that was stuff I wouldn't do now.
The level of riding was unbelievable. I mean, it really opened your eyes to how creative one could get on a bike, you know?
These sessions were just like, well, for me they were legendary. You know, it's just one of those things where I'll never forget just the intensity, but the fact that everybody just had a smile on their face. You know, riding at that level and pushing each other to that level on a daily basis and just having the best time doing it. You know, it was just awesome.
There has been a constant wave of pros moving to Greenville ever since the migration began. But regardless of when the riders moved to town, their stories sound very familiar.
Good friends with Bruce Chrisman, and he wanted to move somewhere as well. And he was saying, you know, Greenville, North Carolina, you know, there's a sweet local park there. Like, we can live across the road from it.
Then Alan Cook and I were at a contest in like June of 2000, and he's like, hey, I heard you want to move to Greenville, and I was like, yeah. And he's like, well, we can get an apartment together, I want to move there too.
And then maybe 2 months after living there, Jeremy Fanberg moved into our living room, had a bed behind the couch sitting next to my dirt bike, and he lived there. It seemed like at that point, you know, I got a big mouth, I guess. I just kept telling people, you gotta come check this place out, you gotta come.
I was, hey man, let's go to Greenville. He's like, really, do you wanna go? And I said, sure, let's do it. And he's like, when do you wanna go? And I said, Monday, let's go. And he's like, well, I got work and stuff. I gotta put my 2 weeks in. I'm like, all right, well, meet me there, I'm leaving.
I had some friends that I seen at some contests, and they were telling me to come up and visit. So I came out for like a month, and I rode every day for a month. Probably only rode about a week or two out of the whole month I was home after that, and from then I decided I'm going to Greenville.
I had a great year in 2005. Dude Tour helped me out a lot, and I ended up making a bunch of money. And everybody was like, don't blow it, put it in a house. And then McKay was like, hey, you want to come to Greenville and have a ride? And I was like, all right. Well, while I was here, I just grabbed like a real estate magazine, and I was just like, I could be living in a mansion, like I could be in a $1 million house in Greenville, like if it was in California. And after a while, I was like, it's stupid not to move out there. Like, it's the best place.
We had been to 4 other colleges in North Carolina and done the whole like campus tour and walk around, and then we came to ECU and we did that too. And then after, me and my buddy were like, oh, we're gonna go to the skate park. So we go to JC Skate Park, and we met up with Terrell Gordy. He took us over to Alan Cook's ramp, and then once it was dark, we went out to Justin Bland's ramp. And I remember calling my mom late that night, like, hey, you know, we're a little bit out of town, we're coming back now. This is the best place ever, I'm coming to school here.
I was actually sitting in my living room with my buddy one day. We were looking on the internet at apartments, and we realized how cheap they were down here. And I kind of just decided then that I was gonna move here and started forcing it onto my parents. At first it was a no, but after 2 weeks of, you know, saying every day that I was gonna move here, they finally gave in.
I moved here kind of on accident, actually. It was supposed to be like a 2-week trip, but I had nothing going on at home, and my friend was like, yeah, you can just stay on my couch. And they kind of just kept going and going, and I finally just got my own apartment.
It got out that Greenville was a sweet scene, and there'd be 30 different crews rolling through Greenville every week, and you couldn't even keep up. It's ridiculous.
Greenville is a bona fide powerhouse in BMX, and the entire action sports world has taken note. And with every contest win that the locals rack up, the more rumors circulate about what life must be like in Pro Town.
What people expect from Greenville and what Greenville actually is sometimes are far different from each other.
I mean, anything you say about Greenville, negative or positive, is probably a misconception, because anything you say about one person is definitely not true about 20 other people that live here.
I think the misconceptions really throughout the whole time was that this was just a training camp. Or maybe they thought that, hey, these guys win contests, all they do is train, and that was the total opposite.
You know, it's not every session is a contest. Not every session is, you know, oh, we're throwing down big and, you know, doing double backflips and 1080s, you know. There are definitely those sessions that happen here, and they're awesome when they happen, but there's plenty of sessions where, you know, you're just cruising and you're just, you know, that's all it is you're having a good time with your buddies. That's what BMX is, that's what Greenville is.
I mean, I've heard everything about Greenville, you know, that people are just training to win X Games, and they're just in the foam pits and, you know, everything. And I mean, some of it's true, you know, a lot of these guys are making their living riding bikes, so, you know, you need to stay on top of it, but it's definitely not like that every day.
Obviously there's the misconception that we train, but we do. If you say you don't train and you live in Greenville, you're a liar. Because I've seen it, I've done it, I've been there, I've seen you at the gym. But we train in a fun way, you know? Like, there's nobody there cracking the whip saying, all right, do 17 flip double whips in the foam pit and then I want to see 3 on the red. That's not how it is. We train by pushing each other. Like, in a game of BMX, I learned more tricks in a game of BMX than I did in a foam pit.
I smile because there's so many good memories that don't involve like sessioning, you know, a foam pit or a resi or a box jump or quarter pipe. It's like more about the times when you're sitting on the decks with your buddies and you're just laughing your ass off because, you know, it's just comedy. I mean, the riding's always been great here and the sessions have always been amazing, but I feel like it's the times when you don't have the, you know, crazy session and all that stuff when you're just sitting there with your boys and stuff. That's what it's all about.
BMX may be the thing that brings riders to town, but finding ways to have fun off the bike are just as important. For some riders, that's no problem at all, while others have to do a little creative thinking to stay occupied.
The biggest thing that I hear a lot of guys are disc golf.
Racquetball. I've got so hooked in racquetball, it's insane. And so is Mira, so is Nyquist, so is Mike Mancuso, everybody, Josh Perry, everybody's hooked on racquetball.
I just started playing tennis, which is kind of cool. We have a tennis court right up the street.
I play video games, I wash dishes, I sit around. You know, you gotta find stuff to do. Go into the woods and, I don't know, try to keep the ticks off of you.
Alistair's house is insane in itself. He's got 7 acres, dirt bike track. He made a wakeboard out of just a piece of rope in his backyard.
I spend a lot of time at Barnes & Noble. It's my favorite place. So the bar, the bookstore, and bed. I sleep a lot.
There's some huge apartment complexes with these pools that don't mind if 30 dirty bike riders show up and drink beer in their pool all day.
Back when I lived with Alan and Scott Wirch, we'd go to Walmart. We'd go to Walmart and hang out at Walmart and buy stupid stuff. One time Alan and I bought paintball guns and we just ended up going back to the apartment and just shooting each other. We both laid on the ground and we shot I don't know how many up in the air and just let them come down on us.
If you like a ton of different stuff to do, it's not really the place for you. You're pretty much here to ride and party and ride some more. That's pretty much all you can get here.
Daytime activities in Greenville may seem limited, but the local nightlife is a different story.
The party life, I'd say, is just as big as the BMX life here. If you're not riding, most likely you're downtown. I mean, we've ran through every bar in this town.
We'd just run a bar or a pub for about 3 to 4 months until they just couldn't take us anymore and we'd had to move to the next one.
If we go downtown, there's definitely, it's not just one BMX guy, there's gonna be like 10 or 12 BMX guys.
I would get not because of the drinks, but I'd get tunnel vision and I'd forget that there was anybody at the bar or the restaurant or wherever we were that wasn't my friend, because so many of my friends were there. There was times where we'd have 30, 40 of us and we're in a capacity of 130 people bar, you know, it was awesome.
I think to this day, a lot of guys that move here, I say there's still a large percentage of why they move here, and it's not because of the skate park. Who would have thought, you know? Small town in North Carolina nobody's ever heard about is this much fun.
Greenville's riding population has exploded over the years, and that ever-growing mix of people and personalities has changed the scene forever.
Greenville went through a lot of changes. We got a better park, more riders. That tight-knit group of guys that we rode with every day was expanding in different personalities.
And then as more people started to come to Greenville and move, and people had groups, and then it was, okay, well, these guys are gonna have their own group and they go ride at a certain ramp at a certain time. And
the bigger the scene got, then the divide started to happen. It's hard to explain it, but it just started splitting down the middle, I felt. People are just going to be people start talking, and the next thing you know, there's little tiffs here, tiffs there, and you can start slowly seeing a divide, you know. I don't like hanging out with him anymore, and you know, of course you could come to any conclusions of why any of it happened, and then the 2 warehouses came in play, and then that really drew the line in the sand between the 2 sides of Greenville, if you will.
I've dabbled in the idea with going to, living up at Woodward and stuff, but it just wasn't me. I couldn't do it. I'd go there for a summer and that was good, but I didn't want to leave Greenville. I think I had a lot of friends here and I liked the area. So I decided I'm going to do a warehouse. I priced it out, I built it. I think there was a lot of misunderstandings what a private warehouse is and a JC skate park is, and I was adamant to keep it private and control who wrote it. I really wanted that private aspect. Like I said, the scene got different. If you can't feel comfortable at your own place, and you built it, it's kind of like having a barbecue at your house. I mean, if you invite one guy to come to your barbecue, does that mean he brings 5 guys? And then once that happened, that even created even more drama. It created a lot. Definitely a lot of gaps between scenes and friends and stuff like that.
Well, when Dave built his warehouse, it was different. I mean, it seemed different for Greenville especially, but then when I talked to people about it, or when they heard about Dave's thing, it seemed different for just bike riding in general. Usually when you built a ramp, it was, anybody that rode a bike, for the most part, was welcome. And that's what we did with all the backyard ramps. I had a backyard ramp, everybody's welcome to ride. There was other backyard ramps, everybody's welcome to ride. And Dave put up his warehouse, and it was more like closed sessions. I think, and it took me a while to see this, but Dave's side was like, I invested all this money for myself to get better, not for the whole town of Greenville to get better. Maybe a couple years after Dave built his warehouse, I started looking at some land and found a piece of land that was going to work, and I'd always been thinking about, like doing a warehouse. I'd seen Dave do it, and I was like, that sounds like a really cool idea, like I'm pale-skinned, I don't really enjoy riding outdoors, save some money on sunblock, invest in a building. This sounds really bad to say, but like my policy was almost the opposite of Dave's. It kind of fueled my fire to basically just open up to everybody. And not that I don't think I would have anyways, because one of the best things about riding is just the people, I feel like, and having that energy and different styles and different people that motivate you. And for me, I just said, you know what, like, yeah, bring your friends. Like if it's crowded one day, well, it might not be crowded tomorrow. So, I can't say I did that entirely without thinking about what Dave is doing and kind of wanting to do the opposite.
Ryan and I were really, really good friends. Both riding for Haro Bikes, both riding for Adidas, had the same agent, had a lot of the same situations, and we lived together.
We were traveling together, at the same airport, rooming together at the contest, riding the same courses at the contest. Then, contest is over, well, we're on the same flight back too, and, we share the ride back to the same house. I think in the back of both our heads, it was kind of like, well, at some point, I'm either going to get good enough to beat Dave, or I'm going to feel like I'm constantly getting beat by Dave. And so neither one's going to be a good situation.
He bought his own house, and then when I was building another house, I moved in with him, and that's when things really, really started getting crazy.
There was definitely a lot of tension. It was never really like something we brought up. It was just something that we kind of pushed to the back, and eventually you throw enough back there, it was just, you couldn't ignore it anymore. There was one incident one night where I really feel like things like came to a head with Dave and I. There was a bunch of guys that were on a trip that were visiting town, a lot of awesome riders. They went to Dave's, had a great time, I guess, and then they were coming to my place the next day, and we were out at the bar, everybody's hanging out. It was a really great night, and Dave came up to me at the bar. I was like, hey, I think the session's gonna go down at your place. Would you mind if I came? And I was like thinking about it, and I was like, and I looked at him, I was like, I don't know. And right then, I could see Dave just get lit up, like, you don't know? What do you mean you don't know? Like, you've ridden my place, like, why can't I ride your place? And I was like, oh, and it just started. And it was just a huge argument, and I swear we were probably arguing for like an hour, and the bar was closing, and we were the only people left except for the other BMX crew, but like, it was, lights were on, and we were just yelling at each other.
I really think we just got, to the point where we just needed to be, big gap, weren't friends for a long time.
I don't think we talked for like at least 2 years after that. And if we did talk, it was like, hey. And they say time heals all wounds and stuff, but with, Dave and I are definitely on a lot better terms now. We'll probably never be as good as friends as we were back in the day, but like, I just look at it as like growing pains.
It was pretty stressful at times, but the good thing is that we've all kind of let a lot let a lot of things go, and you know, me and Ryan are good friends again, and just kind of brushed off all the stuff that really made life tough back when it was, maybe it shouldn't have, maybe it did, whatever, maybe it needed to happen.
We were both in a crazy time where BMX was like getting way more popular, and there was money and contests and stuff was getting thrown at us, and you know, you just kind of learn, like, you know, that stuff wasn't really that important, you know, like the friendships, you know, is what really matters.
Colin Winkleman was one of the many legendary riders to move to Greenville. He had been visiting the town for years, and when he made the move in 2000, he continued to blow everyone away.
Colin Winkleman was the craziest bastard I've ever met, but he was definitely one of the most passionate people I've ever met too.
He was the guy that I would call to go ride. He's the guy I would call first to go up to the bar and have a drink. He was kind of my go-to guy. We hung out all the time.
You call him up and you just, anything. Hey, you want to do this? Yeah, I'll do it. And he's there. You know, he was always down for anything.
He was actually one of the nicest people I met when I first came to America. On the deck, I was in my first pro contest. I was real nervous and like just didn't even feel like I should be there. I met Winkleman and he's like, "What's your name?" I was like, "Colin." He's like, "I'm Colin." And of course I know who he is, but he fully introduced himself like I'd never met him before, and just a real nice guy, just down to earth.
I mean, he was an innovator. Like, he could always come up with wacky ideas. Really good technical rider. And he would go big. I mean, he was a great bike rider.
He would come up with the craziest ideas and have it calculated right down to the 0.5 miles per hour you needed to pull him to jump over 30 cars.
You know, Steve Nowak would put on contests at JC, and this is like '96 and even before then. And I remember me and Colin doing like a pro demo at one of them. It was such a good time.
He definitely brought a piece to our scene that was outside, and you know, he thought about BMX in a totally different way than most of us did.
He definitely was a well thought out dude about 95% of the time, but then there was this 5%, and you'd see this look in his eye, and you wouldn't know what he was going to do, but you knew it was going to be something pretty gnarly. And I don't even think sometimes he knew what he was going to do, but he would just, I don't know, he definitely would blow your mind when you got into that 5% zone.
You could get pumped on the smallest thing, and all of a sudden it was a trend in Greenville. The RC car thing was huge.
We would always just meet up over at his house, and it would be like me, Josh, John Reed, and Winkleman, and we would just work throughout the night, you know, like on cars and planes. And he had a little backyard track set up for the cars too, so we'd always be running cars at night and stuff. Everything that he would want to do was just 110%. He would never half-ass it. It was always to the extreme, or he'd always have to push it a little bit. Everything in life was like that.
I was at home, you know, Winkleman's house is literally, you know, a block down the road, and my buddy Jerry called me and found Winkleman.
I was coming back from New York City, and Gary Ream called me actually. He goes, "Hey, did you hear about Colin?"
I don't think anybody could hear something like that and be like, "Oh yeah, you know, that makes sense." Like, dude, it just doesn't make sense. It's crazy.
You know, it was a sad time for the riding scene of Greenville. No one saw it coming at all. Like, a huge shock, you know, one of the biggest shocks of my life.
Just somebody that close to you in a small world that we have. I mean, it made a huge impact.
People would think, you know, like, oh, did he commit suicide because he was hurt and all this stuff, or, you know, it's not something you're ever going to understand. Nobody's going to know.
We still talk about him all the time, you know, and it's crazy how somebody that talented, you know, in one accident could just take everything from you. It makes you appreciate what we do have, you know, and how petty some stuff really is.
We all got together out at JC and did a memorial for him, and everybody was really, really supportive, and really it did bring everybody back together, you know, close, and kind of realize, man, this is a pretty big deal, and a lot of the things we've been worried about aren't really that big of a deal, so.
Losing Colin was a tragic time in the Greenville scene, but the riders made sure to celebrate his life in a way that Colin would have truly loved.
So before Colin passed away, he invented this thing called Destroyer Fest. And it is just a really big redneck party. Everything that will make a redneck laugh. You know, tons of beer, destruction derby of cars, any kind of burnout, anything that's gonna make a smoke show.
We ended up making flyers for this. You know, in my backyard, we had a band playing, so we had pool jousting. We had this mud pit he wanted to do with one of those ladders that went up. So if you could make it up, this rope thing, you get a shot, and if not, you land in the big mud pit. So that was the first Destroyer Fest, and Colin, like, he loved it. He loved planning it out. I mean, we had committees, you know? Like, you're in charge of the pool jousting. You're in charge of getting the car here, you know? Like, and then Colin wanted to do this huge slide going into the pool off of my roof, and I was like, yeah, you know, that's a good idea, but you know, slide off my roof, you know, it sounds fun, but on my roof, he went and pouted. He was floating in my pool, just pouting, really. So when he died, Josh come to me, he's like, you know what we need to do? And I was like, we need to do that slide, don't we? He's like, yep, let's do it. We worked all night on it. We put some lights out there so we could work, and we made that slide work. And that slide worked perfect.
The cops came and said, hey, if you guys keep lighting fireworks, you know, we're gonna have to give you this $2,000 fine. And I don't know, they were freaking out, and we're like, hey man, our buddy Colin Winkleman passed away, and they knew the name, they had read it in the paper. And they're like, all right, well, we're just gonna bring the truck by in case something catches on fire. I think he definitely would have pointed out where we went wrong, where we could have gone bigger, we could have blown something up bigger. Like, that was his thing. Like, it was always, oh, next time we got to do this. And then but the thing was, there was always a next time, you know? Whether he was doing a stunt or riding a contest or planning a Destroyer Fest, you know? It was always bigger and better, never satisfied. So I don't think he would have been satisfied. He would have been proud, but not satisfied.
The riders and spots to ride may be a big draw in Greenville, but even that can't explain why so many top pros continue to call it home. When you ask the locals, the answer seems simple. It's the riding combined with a lifestyle that you just can't find anywhere else.
I've spent a lot of time actually thinking of why, like, this place, out of everywhere in the world, you have so many people kind of coming to it, and I just figured it was, you know, the people that were here, you had a huge talent, like, just riding base of people here that you could, you know, pretty much ride with and excel and push each other. You have, you know, the college, which makes it a really fun place to go downtown and parties and all that kind of stuff.
You could come out here, you can buy a house or live pretty cheaply, and you could pretty much party all the time and meet girls downtown, and that's just like, that's BMX life right there.
For kids moving to Greenville that are around the college age, it's probably the dream town to move here, because they're moving into a town pretty much as freshmen in college, but they're not in college. Most of them don't really work that much, so they're in the sickest town with the hottest girls, with the craziest scene. And so for a kid riding BMX, it's even better. He doesn't have to worry about school. He just posted up at a sweet apartment, and he gets to tell the chick that he rides bikes instead of studies.
The riding is cool and the riding's awesome, but it's definitely the community of BMXers that are here. I don't really feel like there's any other scenes where, you know, if there's a party going on, like everybody who you see on the deck at a contest is at the party.
Here's why a kid moves to Greenville. He's this 18-year-old kid, shows up to ride with his friend, hangs out with Mira and those guys. They get to ride all day long. Then they go out to the clubs. The dude gets laid. And then he's just like, oh my God, this is just the best. I ride all day, I hook up at night. This is the best thing they've ever done. So that's why people move there.
The nickname Pro Town may sound cliche, but with the amount of talented riders in Greenville, it sums things up perfectly. The new riders are constantly writing their own chapters of the Greenville story, but the OGs will never forget the tight crew that started it all.
It's not the old Greenville of early years, you know. The new guys just don't know it, you know. They can explain and talk about their scene here all they want. They don't know what we used to have, you know. And so they could say it is the same or not the same. In my opinion, it's not the same. It'll never be the same.
The reason you have good old days is because the scene is changing. And for me, when things change, that's progression. The progression that goes in Greenville comes hand in hand with the new riders that are here constantly.
It's real diverse. There's definitely groups of people that hang out together because their brains are chemically balanced the same and they enjoy doing the same things. But as long as you take it lightly and don't worry about what everyone else is doing, you can find the crew that you want to be in and ride with them. But there's definitely whatever you want. If you need apples, you can find apples. You need candy, you can find candy.
While the Greenville scene is constantly evolving, the amount of fun and the incredible level of riding that goes down on a daily basis still remains the same.
Greenville scene's been good, obviously. You can get as good as you want to get. You got the best ramps here. You got no excuses. If you want to learn a trick, it's right there. You can just let it rip.
With Mira's warehouse and Nyquist's warehouse, it's endless. But then you have backyard ramps like this. You have JC Park. There's trails. You have no excuse.
Come late spring, right before summertime, any given session you walk into will just blow your mind. Like, you're just like, wow. You feel like you're at the Dew Tour.
You know, it's just like anywhere else. Some days it's wild and some days you're chilling. Normally it's pretty crazy. It's like I guess the caliber of people that you're riding with, they do some wild things, so it pushes you to do some crazy things too.
I would never be at this level right now if it weren't for Greenville. The tricks that I've learned in the last 5 months are beyond anything that I could have taken into anywhere in Los Angeles.
Predicting the future of BMX in Greenville is anyone's guess, but as long as there are riders and spots, the Pro Town legend is bound to live on.
It's hard for me to say if I'll ever leave Greenville. As far as right now, I'm in the perfect situation. My whole family's here, and all my friends are here. I drive 5 minutes to 5 skate parks. So like the situation's too perfect right now, but later on in life, I could definitely see myself getting out and seeing what else is out there.
I lived in Greenville for like close to 10 years, you know, and it was, you know, a place where I started to really grow some pretty deep roots. The only reason I really left was my mom was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. It was one of those things where she was given a certain amount of time and I didn't want to be away from her during that time, so I packed up within 2 weeks and basically just hightailed out to California to be out there with family and just make the most of that.
I think maybe eventually someday I might move back to California, but I don't really see a reason to anytime soon.
I have no regrets for moving to Greenville. It's been the funnest 4 years of my life, really. It feels like we run this town. I mean, sky's the limit for what we need to do here, and yeah, there's no regrets at all.
I've told myself now that I'll only be here 3 more years from this year. I want to get to California again, so that's my plan. See what happens.
Greenville's home, yeah. I mean, it's you know, raising kids, and it's, like I said, it's a pretty simple town, which is cool. And the only big difference is really is I bring my 2 daughters to school in the morning, and then I meet guys out at the warehouse and ride. But you know, in the end, it's relatively the same.
California's great, but the riding just does not compare to Greenville. Like, it's such an amazing place to be for riding that, I don't know, I can't imagine not having Greenville in my life. I don't know, I probably wouldn't be half the rider I am today.